The Montana sun blazed mercilessly overhead as Sam Crawford guided his weathered pickup truck down the dusty road leading to the livestock auction in Billings. At 42, Sam had become a fixture at these monthly gatherings, though today felt different. His cattle ranch had been struggling since his father's death 3 years prior, and the isolation of the sprawling property had begun weighing heavily on his shoulders. Sam's calloused hands gripped the steering wheel as he navigated through the familiar landscape of rolling hills and endless grasslands. The radio crackled with static, playing an old country song that reminded him of better times when his parents were alive, and the ranch bustled with activity. Now it was just him, his aging border collie Rex, and 200 head of cattle that demanded constant attention. The auction grounds buzzed with activity as ranchers, traders, and curious onlookers gathered around the various pens. Sam parked his truck near the horse corrals, his primary destination today. He needed a good working horse to replace Old Blue, who had passed away the previous winter. The loss had hit Sam harder than he cared to admit. That horse had been his constant companion for 12 years. Walking through the crowd, Sam's boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. He wore his best jeans, a pressed white shirt, and his grandfather's leather vest, his version of dressing up for town. The familiar sounds of lowing cattle, neighing horses, and animated conversations filled the air, creating a symphony that had always brought him comfort. Near the horse pens, Sam noticed an unusual commotion. A group of men stood arguing in hushed tones around a makeshift camp consisting of a battered RV and several tents. Their clothing suggested they were travelers, possibly part of a migrant work crew that moved from ranch to ranch during harvest season. What caught Sam's attention wasn't the men, but a young woman sitting quietly on a wooden crate nearby. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with long dark hair that caught the afternoon light and deep brown eyes that seemed to hold stories far beyond her years. Her clothes were simple but clean, worn jeans and a faded blue shirt that had seen better days. Despite the chaos around her, she maintained a dignified posture, her hands folded in her lap as she watched the proceedings with an expression of resigned acceptance. That mare's worth $3,000, maybe $3,500 in good condition. Sam overheard one of the men saying in accented English, "But we need cash now, not promises." Sam approached the group cautiously, his curiosity piqued. The men were clearly in some kind of financial distress, and their conversation suggested they were trying to sell more than just livestock. As he drew closer, he could see the young woman's situation more clearly. She wasn't just observing the transaction, she was part of it. "Excuse me," Sam interrupted politely, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came from years of dealing with difficult situations. "I couldn't help but notice you folks seem to be having some trouble." The apparent leader of the group, a weathered man in his 50s with graying hair and desperate eyes, looked up at Sam with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "You interested in buying a horse, mister? We got a fine mare here, trained for ranch work." Sam glanced at the horse in question, a beautiful chestnut mare with intelligent eyes and good conformation. She was indeed worth the asking price, but something about the entire situation felt off. His gaze returned to the young woman, who had looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I might be interested," Sam said carefully, "but I get the feeling there's more to this story than just selling a horse." The older man's shoulders sagged slightly. "Look, mister, we're in a bad spot. Our work dried up faster than expected, and we need to get to California where my brother has jobs lined up for us, but we're short on gas money," and he gestured helplessly toward the young woman. "Maria here. She's been with us since her family passed through last year. Good girl, hard worker, but we can't take care of her anymore." Sam felt his stomach tighten as the implications became clear. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? She needs a home," the man continued, his voice heavy with emotion that seemed genuine. "Someone who can give her stability, maybe help her build a proper life. We've been like family to her, but we can't offer her what she deserves, a real chance at something better." Maria finally spoke, her voice soft but clear, with only a slight accent coloring her English. "It's okay, Mr. Crawford." Sam was surprised she knew his name, but then realized she might have heard it called at previous auctions. "They're good people, but they're right. I need to find my own way." The weight of the situation settled on Sam's shoulders like a heavy blanket. He'd come here looking for a horse to ease the burden of ranch work, but life seemed to be presenting him with something far more complex and significant. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for years suddenly felt more acute, contrasted against this young woman's obvious need for stability and belonging. "Tell you what," Sam found himself saying, surprised by his own words. "I'll take the horse and the responsibility that comes with it. Fair price for both." The transaction that followed felt surreal. Money changed hands, papers were signed for the mare, and informal agreements were made regarding Maria's situation. She would work on the ranch in exchange for room, board, and a fair wage, an arrangement that satisfied everyone's legal and moral concerns while giving her the fresh start she clearly needed. As the group prepared to continue their journey westward, Maria gathered her few belongings, a worn duffel bag and a small wooden box that seemed to hold particular significance for her. The farewells were emotional but brief, and soon Sam found himself walking toward his truck with a new horse trailer in tow and a young woman whose life had just become intertwined with his own. The drive back to the ranch was quiet, with Maria sitting in the passenger seat, looking out at the vast Montana landscape with an expression of cautious hope. Sam found himself stealing glances at her, wondering what he'd gotten himself into and whether he was equipped to handle the responsibility he'd just accepted. The Crawford Ranch sprawled across 1,500 acres of prime Montana grassland, its main house sitting like a weathered sentinel against the backdrop of distant mountains. As Sam's truck pulled up the gravel driveway, Maria pressed her face closer to the window, taking in her new surroundings with a mixture of apprehension and wonder. The two-story farmhouse, painted white with green shutters, looked solid and welcoming despite showing signs of a bachelor's upkeep. "Home sweet home," Sam said quietly, parking near the front porch where Rex immediately appeared, tail wagging cautiously as he sensed the presence of a stranger. Maria stepped out of the truck slowly, her worn boots crunching on the gravel. The late afternoon air carried the scent of hay and cattle, mixed with the earthy smell of recent rain. She stood for a moment, absorbing the vastness of the property, rolling pastures dotted with grazing cattle, several outbuildings including a large red barn, and corrals that spoke of a working ranch operation. "It's beautiful," she said simply, and Sam felt an unexpected surge of pride in his family's legacy. Rex approached Maria with the careful dignity of an old dog meeting new pack members. She extended her hand for him to sniff, and after a moment of consideration, he allowed her to scratch behind his ears. "And who's this handsome fellow?" "That's Rex. He's been my foreman for the past 8 years, though his salary negotiations have gotten pretty demanding lately." Sam's attempt at humor earned him a small smile from Maria, the first genuine expression of warmth he'd seen from her. Sam led her up the porch steps, noting how she took in every detail: the worn wooden boards, the rocking chair where his father used to sit each evening, the hanging flower baskets his mother had installed years ago that Sam had somehow managed to keep alive. "The house isn't much to look at, but it's solid. Been in my family for 3 generations. The interior of the house reflected a man living alone, clean but sparse, functional rather than comfortable. The living room contained a well-worn leather couch, a stone fireplace, and shelves lined with ranching manuals and a few paperback novels. Family photographs dotted the mantel, showing happier times when the house had been filled with life. "There's a guest room upstairs," Sam said, suddenly feeling awkward about the sleeping arrangements. "It was my sister's room before she moved to Denver. Nothing fancy, but the bed's comfortable and there's a window that catches the morning sun." Maria followed him up the narrow staircase, her hand trailing along the smooth wooden banister. The guest room was indeed simple: a single bed with a handmade quilt, a small dresser, and a rocking chair positioned near the window. Lace curtains filtered the afternoon light, creating patterns on the wooden floor. "This is perfect," Maria said, setting her duffel bag on the bed. "Thank you, Mr. Crawford." "Just Sam, please. Mr. Crawford was my father." He paused in the doorway, suddenly uncertain about the boundaries of their arrangement. "I'll let you get settled. Dinner's usually around 6. Nothing fancy, just whatever I can manage. Tomorrow we can talk about the work situation and figure out what makes sense for both of us." As Sam headed back downstairs, he found himself moving with more purpose than he'd felt in months. The house already seemed different with Maria's presence, not just the physical reality of another person, but an energy that had been missing since his parents' deaths. He realized he was actually looking forward to dinner conversation for the first time in years. In the kitchen, Sam surveyed his limited culinary options with new concern. His usual rotation of canned soup, frozen dinners, and occasional grilled meat suddenly seemed inadequate for a guest. He settled on making his mother's recipe for beef stew, one of the few dishes he'd actually learned to prepare properly. Meanwhile, Maria unpacked her few belongings with careful deliberation. The wooden box from her travel bag opened to reveal treasured items: a faded photograph of a family that must have been hers, a silver cross on a thin chain, and a small journal with pages filled in Spanish. She placed these items on the dresser like creating a small shrine to her past. Looking out the window, she could see Sam moving around the corral where he'd put the new mare. His movements were efficient and gentle as he checked the horse's condition and ensured she had adequate food and water. Maria found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the careful way he handled the animals, the underlying kindness in his actions, despite his obvious discomfort with their situation. When she came downstairs for dinner, the kitchen was filled with rich aromas that reminded her of family meals from her childhood. Sam had set the table for two, using what were clearly his best dishes and silverware. The gesture touched her more than he could know. "Smells wonderful," she said, taking the seat he indicated. "My mother's recipe. She always said the secret was browning the meat properly and not rushing the vegetables." Sam ladled the stew into bowls, his movements betraying a nervousness that made Maria realize he was as uncertain about this arrangement as she was. The meal began quietly, both of them navigating the strange intimacy of sharing food in what had been a solitary space for Sam. Gradually, conversation began to flow. Maria asked about the ranch operations, showing genuine interest in the cattle breeding program and the seasonal rhythms of ranch life. Sam found himself talking more than he had in months, explaining the challenges of modern ranching and his dreams for expanding the operation. "I worked on farms before," Maria offered. "Different crops, different animals, but the principles are similar. Hard work, attention to detail, respect for the land and the animals." "Where did you learn that?" Sam asked gently. Maria's expression grew distant. "My family had a small farm in Mexico before we came north. I was young, but I remember helping with everything, feeding chickens, tending the garden, helping during harvest time. When we lost the farm, we joined other families looking for work. I've been learning ever since." The simple honesty of her words struck Sam deeply. Here was someone who understood the value of hard work and the connection between land and livelihood. As the evening progressed, he found himself seeing Maria not as a responsibility he'd impulsively taken on, but as a potential partner in the challenging but rewarding life of running a ranch. 3 weeks had passed since Maria's arrival at the Crawford Ranch, and the autumn air carried the crisp promise of winter approaching. The cottonwood trees lining the creek had begun their transformation to gold, creating a stunning contrast against the endless blue Montana sky. Maria had settled into a routine that surprised both her and Sam with its natural rhythm. Each morning, she rose before dawn to help with the cattle feeding, her movements becoming more confident as she learned the specific needs of Sam's herd. The Angus cattle had initially been wary of her presence, but her patient, gentle approach had gradually won their acceptance. Sam watched from a distance as she worked, impressed by her intuitive understanding of animal behavior and her tireless work ethic. "You're a natural at this," he commented one morning as they finished distributing hay to the pasture. Maria had noticed a heifer showing signs of distress and had immediately alerted Sam, potentially preventing a serious health issue. "Animals don't lie," she replied, brushing dust from her jeans. "They show you exactly what they're feeling if you know how to look." Sam nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her words. Over the past weeks, he'd begun to appreciate not just Maria's practical skills, but her perspective on life. She approached each day with a quiet determination that reminded him of his own mother's strength during the ranch's difficult years. The ranch work had expanded beyond just cattle care. Maria had taken initiative in areas Sam had long neglected, organizing the cluttered barn, mending fences with surprising skill, and even attempting to revive his mother's abandoned vegetable garden. Her Spanish heritage brought knowledge of crops and growing techniques that complemented Sam's traditional ranching methods. "Where did you learn to weld?" Sam asked one afternoon, finding Maria expertly repairing a broken gate hinge with equipment from his workshop. "My uncle taught me when I was 15, she said, not looking up from her work. "He said a woman should know how to fix things herself, not wait for someone else to do it." The gate repair was flawless, and Sam felt a growing respect for Maria's capabilities. She wasn't just helping with ranch work. She was improving systems and solving problems he'd been putting off for months. More importantly, her presence had begun to transform the lonely atmosphere of the ranch into something that felt like a true home. Evenings had become the most significant part of their routine. After the day's work was finished, they would sit on the front porch, sharing simple meals and conversation that grew deeper with each passing day. Maria would tell stories about her travels with the work crew, describing the different places she'd seen and the various people she'd met. Sam found himself sharing memories of his childhood on the ranch, stories about his parents that he hadn't spoken aloud in years. "Your father sounds like he was a good man," Maria said one evening after Sam had recounted a particularly fond memory of learning to ride horses under his father's patient guidance. "He was tough when he needed to be, but fair. He always said the land would take care of us if we took care of it properly." Sam paused, looking out over the pastures where his cattle grazed peacefully. "I think he would have liked you." The comment hung in the air between them, carrying weight that both acknowledged, but neither was quite ready to address directly. Their relationship had evolved from a business arrangement to something approaching friendship, but underlying currents of deeper connection were becoming impossible to ignore. The first real test of their developing bond came during a particularly challenging week when an early snowstorm threatened the cattle operation. The weather forecast called for temperatures dropping below freezing, with the possibility of heavy snow that could trap cattle in the outer pastures. "We need to move the herd closer to the barn," Sam announced over breakfast, his weather radio crackling with updates about the approaching storm. Maria was already pulling on her work boots. "How many head are we talking about?" "About 60 in the north pasture, maybe 40 more scattered in the creek bottom. If we get the snow they're predicting, we could lose animals." The next several hours became a testament to their partnership. Working together with Rex and the new mare, they systematically moved groups of cattle from the distant pastures to areas closer to the ranch buildings where they could provide shelter and supplemental feed if necessary. Maria's horsemanship skills, developed during her years of varied work, proved invaluable as she helped guide reluctant cattle through narrow gates and across creek crossings. The storm arrived with brutal intensity, bringing not just snow but wind that created whiteout conditions. Sam and Maria worked through the afternoon, checking on animals, breaking ice on water troughs, and ensuring that feed was distributed to all the groups they'd moved. By evening, they were exhausted, but satisfied that they'd done everything possible to protect the herd. "I couldn't have managed this alone," Sam admitted, as they sat in the warm kitchen, thawing out with hot coffee and bowls of soup. "Thank you." Maria looked up from her meal, her cheeks still pink from the cold. "We're partners now, aren't we? Partners help each other." The word partners resonated between them, carrying implications that went beyond just ranch work. Sam found himself studying Maria's face in the lamplight, noting the strength in her features and the quiet confidence in her eyes. She had become essential to his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. "There's something I need to tell you," Maria said softly, setting down her coffee cup. "I've been thinking about what happens when winter really sets in. Whether this arrangement is temporary or what," Sam prompted gently, "or whether I'm building something permanent here." Her voice was steady but vulnerable. "I need to know if you see this as just seasonal help or if there's a future for me on this ranch." Sam felt the weight of her question. Over the past weeks, he'd found himself imagining scenarios where Maria stayed permanently, where their partnership evolved into something deeper and more committed. The ranch had come alive with her presence, and he couldn't imagine returning to the isolation he'd known before. "I see a future," he said finally, "if you want one. This ranch needs someone like you," and he paused, gathering courage. "I need someone like you." The admission hung in the air between them, marking a turning point in their relationship that both recognized as significant. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the warm kitchen, two people who had found each other by chance were beginning to build something lasting together. Spring arrived at the Crawford Ranch with a burst of wildflowers and the gentle sounds of new life. 6 months had passed since that fateful day at the livestock auction, and the transformation of both the ranch and the people who called it home was remarkable. Maria's presence had breathed new life into every corner of the property, from the thriving vegetable garden to the newly organized barn, but most importantly, into Sam's heart. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Maria prepared breakfast, her movements confident and graceful in the space that had truly become her domain. She hummed a soft melody while cooking, a habit that had developed over the winter months and now served as Sam's favorite way to wake up. The aroma of fresh coffee and homemade biscuits filled the air, creating an atmosphere of warmth and contentment that the old house had never known. "The Peterson contract came through," Sam announced, entering the kitchen with a letter from the mailbox. "They want to purchase 20 head of our best breeding stock. That's the third major sale this quarter." Maria turned from the stove, her face lighting up with genuine pride. "That's wonderful news. Your breeding program is really paying off." The success wasn't just Sam's. Maria's keen eye for cattle genetics and her innovative approaches to herd management had significantly improved the ranch's productivity. Together, They had developed a reputation for producing high-quality Angus cattle that commanded premium prices throughout the region. "Our breeding program," Sam corrected gently, emphasizing the word "our." Over the months, the distinction between his work and hers had gradually dissolved into a seamless partnership that extended far beyond ranch operations. After breakfast, they walked together toward the barn, Rex trotting alongside them with the contentment of a dog whose pack was finally complete. The spring air carried the scent of fresh grass and blooming wildflowers, while the distant sound of cattle lowing created a peaceful soundtrack to their morning routine. "I've been thinking about the Henderson property," Maria said, as they checked on a cow that was due to calve soon. "With the success we've been having, maybe it's time to consider expanding." Sam paused in his examination of the pregnant cow, struck by the casual way Maria had said "we" and "our." Somewhere along the way, she had stopped being his employee and had become his true partner in every sense of the word. The realization filled him with a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. "The Henderson place would double our grazing capacity," he agreed. "But it's a big investment. Are you sure you want to tie yourself to this operation for the long term?" Maria met his gaze directly, her brown eyes steady and certain. "Sam, I've been tied to this operation since the day I decided to stay. The question isn't whether I want to commit to the ranch, it's whether you're ready to admit that this partnership goes beyond cattle and crops." The conversation they'd been dancing around for months had finally arrived. Sam felt his heart racing as he looked at the woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering. Maria had become not just his partner in work, but his closest friend, his confidant, and the person who had taught him that love could bloom in the most unexpected circumstances. "Maria," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "when I brought you along with that horse, I thought I was just solving a problem. I had no idea I was bringing home the person who would become the center of my world. And I had no idea that being traded for a horse would lead me to the life I'd always dreamed of," she replied, stepping closer to him. "A real home, meaningful work, and," she paused, her cheeks flushing slightly, "and a man who sees me as an equal partner in everything." Sam reached out to take her hands, noting how perfectly they fit together, her smaller hands bearing the calluses of hard work, just like his own. "I love you, Maria. I've loved you for months, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you might think it was just loneliness or gratitude. And I love you," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Not because you gave me a home, but because you gave me a place where I could be myself completely, where my strength is valued and my heart is safe." Their first kiss happened naturally, without the awkwardness that might have been expected after months of careful friendship. It was a kiss that spoke of patience and deep affection, of partnership and passion, of two people who had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were looking for. The spring day seemed to sparkle around them as they held each other in the barn doorway, Rex wagging his tail as if he understood that his family was finally complete. In the distance, the cattle grazed peacefully in pastures that had never been more productive, while the ranch building stood solid and well-maintained, testament to the care and dedication of two people working together toward common goals. "So," Sam said eventually, his arms still wrapped around Maria, "should we start looking at that Henderson property seriously?" "Yes," Maria laughed, her happiness bubbling over. "And maybe we should start planning a wedding too. I'm thinking something simple, maybe right here on the ranch, with just our closest friends and family." "You want to marry a rancher who brought you along with a horse?" Sam teased, though his eyes were serious and full of love. "I want to marry my partner," Maria corrected. "The man who saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. The man who taught me that home isn't a place, it's the people you choose to build a life with." As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, the Crawford Ranch spread out around them like a promise of the future they would build together. The land that had been in Sam's family for 3 generations would now continue with Maria as its co-guardian, her strength and wisdom ensuring that the legacy would flourish for generations to come. The lonely rancher, who had gone to an auction looking for a working horse, had found instead a woman who would become his wife, his partner, and the heart of his home. And the young woman who had been traded for a horse had discovered that sometimes the most unexpected transactions lead to the most precious treasures: love, belonging, and a future bright with possibility. The Crawford Ranch had always been about family, hard work, and the enduring connection between people and the land they tend. Now, with Maria and Sam united in love and purpose, it would continue to be all of those things, but with a new generation ready to write the next chapter of its story.